I've been able to use the 3 large foldables in the US market, and overall my experience has been pretty great. The biggest downside I would say has to be the price, because they're so expensive. It makes it a bit difficult to really jump into that form factor. All 3 phones are actually pretty close in price, so that makes for really good comparisons. So in this video, I'll be comparing a few of the major aspects of these phones, and I'll mention which one I believe performed the best in the given category, and at the end, I'll choose which one I believe did the best overall. Not all categories will have a clear winner, but some will. So let's get started with build quality. All phones are amazing in this aspect. All feel strong, and they did pretty well in some of the stress test videos I've seen, with the exception of the Pixel Fold. So the Pixel Fold actually failed the stress test that I saw, and it was when putting extra pressure on the back of the phone, backward pressure, when the screen was open. I believe the issue lies with the 2 halves not meeting in the middle and providing that extra rigidity. Besides it, basically falling to the 3rd spot because of the stress test. There is something else that I did find to be the worst of the 3, and that's the hinge. So I do like how it behaves most of the way, but at the end of it, it feels very spongy and makes it a bit difficult to know if it's fully open or not. In contrast, both the Samsung and OnePlus snap open, and for me that's my favorite version of the hinge mechanism. I don't feel like the snapping at the end really affects the usability of the flex mode, because from what I've noticed, the snap doesn't really occur until it's basically almost fully open anyway, so it's not going to affect that functionality. And I actually have the OnePlus here. Let's try it out, and we'll see here that it takes it's pretty much almost to a point where you wouldn't be using the flex mode in that angle before it decides to pop open. And the same is gonna go for the Samsung. So I think the Samsung even goes further than the OnePlus. Yep, it goes further than the OnePlus by a little bit, and at the end it gives a little bit of a snap. It's a lot weaker of a snap than the OnePlus, but you still feel it and it feels solid. So these 2 hinges are, I believe, perform better than the Pixel Folds. Now comparing the Z Fold 5 and the OnePlus, I believe that the OnePlus's overall quality is a little bit better because they were able to pretty much seal the inside of the screen all the way around. I don't see any gaps whatsoever, and in my experience, this has kept any sort of lint or pocket debris from getting in between the 2 halves. Whereas with the Samsung, even though it does fold flat, the way that they designed it, it's not touching all the way across, all the way around. With Samsung instead, they have little bumpers on the corners, and that's what stops it and keeps it flat. So the issue with that is that it still leaves a small gap where lint and other debris can get inside. So that's the part that puts it in 2nd place for me in terms of the build quality. The next category is design comfort. So in terms of the shape, they all basically have the same shape overall, which is one rounded side and one squared off side. And that leads to one of the issues where the phone is more comfortable on the right hand versus the left hand because of that. The real difference comes in weight. So in overall weight, we have the Pixel Fold being the heaviest, and I believe the exact number was 283 grams. Then comes the Z Fold 5 at 253. So the 30-gram difference, which might not seem like a lot, but the longer you hold something, every gram counts. And then the lightest one is the OnePlus Open, and there's actually 2 weights for this one depending on which version you get. So the black with the leather weighs 239, I believe it was. And the one that has the green glass comes in at 245 grams. So either way, both are lighter than the Z Fold 5, one a bit more than the other, but it's within that range where it's not gonna make too much of a difference. The one that really makes the biggest difference is the Pixel Fold at 283 grams. And this is something that I've noticed using in real life. So the one I've carried the most was probably the Pixel Fold, and I would actually feel the fatigue. After some time of holding it with the with my pinky under the phone, eventually I would have to kind of switch fingers and put it on my ring finger so that the weight, so my pinky could take a bit of a break. It's funny because even though the weight is not much different, I think the weight is dispersed a bit more with the OnePlus Open because it's wider, so it does feel even lighter than it really shows on in the actual weight. So the downside of the OnePlus and the one that kind of gives it a little knock on the design comfort is the button placement. So when I'm holding the phone, I can only reach the power button, so that's in a good enough spot, I guess. But then if I go to reach the volume, I have to adjust my hand. So I have to adjust a little bit for the volume down rocker, but for the volume up rocker, I have to adjust it quite a bit. So that alone just makes it less comfortable to use because you have to be adjusting your finger every time you wanna adjust the volume. In contrast, the Z Fold 5, even though it's actually a little bit taller, the button placement is lower. I don't have to adjust that off for the Pixel Fold, so I do prefer the button placement on the Pixel Fold, but I think the weight being so much higher just knocks it out of the top spot. Actually puts it into the third spot. Second spot for this category, I would say the OnePlus, just because of the button placement. And the weight difference is not really enough to push it to the top. So the winner in this category, I would say, is the Z Fold 5. This next category, I've seen plenty of opinions on in terms of what it should or shouldn't be, and that's the outside screen. And even basing it on the phone design for the different companies, they're all different, so it seems like there's no real consensus on which shape or aspect ratio or size is a correct one for these large folding phones. I, for one, believe that this form factor benefits from having a fully usable outside screen where it's super comfortable to use. That way you're able to use the front screen all the time and only open it to the larger inner screen when you want. And with Samsung, I kind of feel like you're forced to open it to the larger screen. I get that they want you to use it, but it feels like it's just unnecessarily forceful to make you have a really good experience. So in terms of the having a fully usable front screen, obviously you could do everything you want with the Samsung, but it's not as comfortable as the other two phones. So by that aspect, I will place this one in third already. So the OnePlus and the Pixel Fold are in this category fighting for top spot. There's a couple differences. The Pixel Fold is a little bit shorter and wider. It's good for watching videos, but it has a drawback that not every app is made for this aspect ratio. So the aspect ratio in the Pixel Fold, I believe, is in the 17 point something by 9 ratio. And the OnePlus Open was in the like 20 by 9 ratio, which is pretty much the standard ratio for the industry on pretty much every phone that's not folding. Because of that, there are apps that just don't fit 100% with the Pixel Fold. Very few, but it does exist, and that's why I think that this is a second best cover screen, and I actually believe that the OnePlus Open is the best experience on the cover screen. Alright, so now we're moving to the main large inner screen. This is the part of the phone that is the real appeal for these large folding phones, having that large canvas to really be able to multitask and have a larger screen overall. By overall size, the OnePlus is the largest one, but it's not necessarily going to give you the largest viewing experience. So when it comes to media, the OnePlus is a little bit shorter. I mean, it's minuscule and you won't be able to tell, but it's just a little bit shorter. So that means that the overall viewing experience on a 16 by 9 or 16 by 10 aspect ratio is going to be a little bit smaller on the OnePlus Open. So I really don't think anyone will notice because it's just that small, but having that larger number can make it seem like you're going to be able to see things bigger. It really depends on how things are formatted. Where the larger screen really comes in handy is for multitasking, not necessarily for media consumption. So in that aspect, yeah, the OnePlus Open is going to have the most real estate. But I mean, the Pixel Fold and Z Fold 5 are not that far behind in that aspect either. What kind of separates these phones is the crease. So the Pixel the Pixel Fold and the Z Fold 5 both have creases that feel like they're 1 or 2 generations old at this point. And the OnePlus Open has reduced the crease to what the modern phones have, or the modern foldables have. And that's what makes the OnePlus the better main screen or inner screen experience. The Pixel Fold and the Z Fold 5 are basically tied in this category, so no third place ones here, just tied in second. So my next category, I had to basically separate this one and make it its own because I think it's that important, and it's the multitasking. All three of these phones have some sort of multitasking. Pixels is the most basic, in which you cannot have a floating window and you can only have 2 apps splitting the screen. So in that sense, it's the most basic one, and it provides the least amount of features. So it falls to third place right off the bat. So then that leaves the Z Fold 5 and the OnePlus Open. Both of these phones let you open up 3 apps at one time and then have a floating app if you want. The biggest difference comes that Samsung, you have to share whatever real estate is visible with the 3 apps. So you're gonna have one app using half the screen, and then the other 2 apps splitting that half, so you have 2 little squares for those apps. So in terms of usability, that kind of reduces it a little bit. What OnePlus did with their open canvas, which was, to me, I would say the most important, if not the second most important thing that they came out with this phone. And that with the open canvas, you can have the apps split the screen in half, and then add another one. Depending on the app's requirements, it can either be split again next to it or open below it in the square aspect ratio. You can also expand all the apps so they all have the same square aspect ratio, which is basically the same ratio as the inner screen, just shrunken down a little bit so the border of the other apps show. But it really does feel almost like a full screen experience for each app. All it takes is a little tap to get you to the app you want to use, and then you start using it. So the fact that you can have these basically full-size apps open at the same time, and even have floating windows, puts this one at the top for me. I do feel I have to mention something. It was brought to my attention in one of my videos someone posted, and I hadn't noticed because I don't really do this, but the Chrome application cannot be open twice. There can't be 2 instances of Chrome open, so you can't compare 2 web pages unless you're using 2 separate browsers. So that is a bit of a knock on the open canvas. I did check the Z Fold 5 and the Pixel Fold, and both allow you to have 2 instances of Chrome open, so you could compare the different web pages. Even though that is a knock on the OnePlus, since it's not really something that's been an issue with me at all, because I'm usually have apps side by side, not 2 separate web pages. I haven't really had it be an issue. So even though some might find this, and rightfully so, might find this a limitation, for me it hasn't been, so it's staying on my top spot. So the next category is the camera, and I'm going to be splitting this one into 3 subcategories. It's going to be hardware, photo, and video. So first I'm going to be going over the hardware, and this has been this form factor's biggest Achilles heel. And I'm sure it's actually been one of those things that keeps people from buying it as well. To pay that much money and not have flagship spec cameras does put some doubt in buyers, I'm sure. That is until the OnePlus Open came out. The OnePlus Open came out with some sensors that rival true flagship phones, and that right there places this one at the top of my list for camera hardware. In terms of the Z Fold 5 and Pixel Fold, I would keep these tied at second because their camera arrays are fairly similar and comparable. But for comparison, to have an idea, the OnePlus Open's ultra wide and telephoto sensors are the same size as the Pixel Fold's main sensor, and I'm not too sure what the size is on the Z Fold 5's main sensor, but it's gonna be around the same size as the Pixel Fold's. So that's pretty crazy that the 2 smaller sensors on the OnePlus are comparable to the main sensors on the other 2 phones. Next, let's talk about photos. For starters, the OnePlus Open has more details in the majority of the range that these phones can reach. I would even say that in a lot of cases, the photos still have more detail in the longer ranges when compared to the Pixel Fold, which has a 5x lens rather than a 3x lens. However, photo optimization is another aspect to consider. This one's a bit more difficult to compare, but I'll try my best, since a lot of it has to do with preference. So the Pixel Fold and Z Fold 5 both have heavier photo optimization, and that can lead to more consistent shots since all the photos are going to have a lot of optimization, even the ones that are taken in bad light or in difficult situations. That optimization is going to kick in and kind of keep the photo in line to what they consider to be a good photo. But there are times in which sometimes those phones over optimize the photo, and that's kind of when I prefer the lighter optimization of the OnePlus and some of the other companies. The drawback to having lighter optimization is that you can get some inconsistencies on your results. Like previously mentioned, tougher lighting or tougher scenarios will have varying results even taken back to back. The one thing is that regardless of which route you take of the heavy optimization or light optimization, all the photos can be edited afterward and kind of changed to the style that you like. So overall, I do prefer the OnePlus Open. I really like the light optimization and being able to edit the photo afterward on my end if I think it needs more. And the fact that it has the larger sensors that get more detail really pushes this one just above the others into the number one spot for me. The second place on this category has got to be the Pixel Fold because it has a way better range with the 5x lens, and optimization is preferred by many people based on a lot of the last few years of ratings that I've seen. So third place goes to the Z Fold 5 in photos. I think the biggest drawback to the Z Fold 5 in terms of the photos is a 3x telephoto lens. That is the weak point of that camera in my opinion. That 3x lens is pretty good in good lighting, but pretty poor in low lighting. It doesn't perform well once you pass 4 to 5x. Even 6x, you start to see some degradation in terms of in the photo which is a bit sooner than I would expect and a bit sooner than you see on the Pixel Fold and the OnePlus Open. And finally, let's go over the video recording. In terms of video recording, I feel like the 1x to 3x setup has performed better than the 1x to 5x setup, at least based on these three phones. And the reason I say this is because the video results for the Pixel Fold between 3.5 and 4.9x are pretty rough and nowhere near the quality of the other two phones. Another issue that I have with the Pixel Fold is the rough transitions. So going from that 4.9 to the 5x, there is a delay in transitioning to the 5x lens, and even when it does transition, it's one of the roughest transitions I've seen from any of these three phones. I have heard complaints about the OnePlus Open having some rough transitions. I don't necessarily notice it. I think at least visually the transition is pretty smooth. What I have noticed is that it looks like the exposure changes real quickly in the beginning. So you get when you transition, you get like a split second of a bright exposure and then it corrects itself. They all have some sort of exposure change when going from one lens to the other. But that's all I really noticed on the OnePlus Open. The Z Fold 5 is also very smooth in transitioning between lenses, and the Z Fold 5 kind of does the opposite. Instead of overexposing, it looks like it underexposes for a split second and then brightens up a little bit. And my third issue with the Pixel Fold in video recording is that when you're zooming in while recording, the zoom in process is very choppy on the Pixel Fold. It's kind of like if it stops at each notch and you see it in the video. The Z Fold 5 handles it a lot better and is actually really smooth. It doesn't jump from one notch to the next like the Pixel Fold does. And then the OnePlus Open has that bar where you tap and drag up, and depending on how high you drag it up is the speed in which it zooms in. So you're not jumping from lens to lens. Instead, you're always transitioning, zooming in while you're recording. I like that feature. I don't like to be recording and then to tap on a number and just let the phone just rapidly zoom in. It doesn't seem like it's gonna provide a good video, and seems less professional. Makes it seem more like you're recording on a phone rather than an actual camera. I feel like I was picking on the Pixel Fold for a little bit there, but so the Z Fold 5 also has the same limitation as the photos, and that's a 3x camera lens. So yeah, recording on 3x is fine. Up to maybe 5x, 6x is pushing it, but it has the lowest range. So even though it does come out good and everything's smooth and everything, the range is pretty short on the Z Fold 5. With the OnePlus Open, which has the 3x lens just like the Z Fold 5, at 6x, the OnePlus Open still feels very clear and does a better job overall than the Z Fold 5. Even with that limitation, I still consider the Z Fold 5 to be the best video recording of the three. But OnePlus Open has shown that it's not too far behind. The difference might be that OnePlus Open is probably relying on the hardware a lot more than the other two phones, but I'm okay with that, and that provides the results that I like anyway. And that shows that hardware is still important, and the companies can't just rely on software to make up for providing cheaper lenses into the phone. So when tallying all these categories up, the OnePlus Open comes out on top for the best large foldable in the US market, in my opinion. I can't say I'm surprised that it came out on top of my list, because OnePlus loaded up this phone with the best hardware it could find, and it really shows in how it performs and behaves. And we gotta keep in mind that this is not really their first foldable, because they share the phone with Oppo, which have already made 2 generations before this one. That's basically why it doesn't feel like a first generation folding phone when using it. Thanks for watching. Let me know which folding phone you think is the best in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.